Someone stole my credit card and bought an iPad but had it shipped to my house. What's your best stupid criminal story? Story 1. This story begins at around 3 a.m. outside my apartment complex. We lived in a corner suite, ground floor apartment. I heard a rustling and looked outside my windows. The guy was dragging around a box of donated clothes in the parking lot, occasionally stopping to throw out some ladies' clothing, which I assume it all was. Now, the next morning, my girlfriend and I got back up and went to work. I work only a few blocks away, so I walked. I passed by the same guy sleeping on the corner of the street. I walked by not thinking anything of it. Around 10 a.m., I got a call from the landlord saying my apartment got broken into. After I passed the guy and got out of sight, he got up and knocked on the neighbor's windows. She looked out and he told her that he forgot his keys and wanted to be let in. She said, "No, frick off." 2 minutes after that, she heard the guy knocking on our window. Apparently, since no one answered, he bustled the glass and let himself in. I guess he didn't hear this? After tearing our place apart and stuffing our valuables in a laundry basket, he walked up and down the hallway screaming. He was confronted by someone and said he was looking for his girlfriend's apartment. After this encounter, the guy called a cab. Yeah, you heard me, a cab. A neighbor saw the cab pull up and this guy get in with the laundry basket full of crap, so she wrote down the cab number and called the cops. The cops called the cabbie and asked if someone looked like he had stolen a bunch of stuff. Cabbie said yes. Cops asked the cabbie where he was being dropped off and picked him up there. Best parts? He pleaded not guilty and made me go to court. He left his shoes behind and took mine. I have size 14 feet. He has size 7. The thing that was the nail in the coffin, I'm told, was that I mentioned to a cop after I collected everything that I was still missing my bacon-flavored toothpicks. The cops found them in his pants pocket. When taking my Xbox 360, rather than disconnecting the network cable, he ripped it out, leaving the end in the 360. I don't know how hard he must have had to rip a network cable in half. My girlfriend was missing some of her birth control pills. We never found them. Assumed eaten. After everything, we only lost 1 sword and 1 beer. Story 2. Can't top the grand bow story, but I have a good example of thieves picking the wrong person, or wrong persons in this case, to rob. I was working as a manager at an ice rink at the time. One night during the adult league game, I heard a ruckus coming from the other side of my office wall. These are not thin walls, so I went to investigate. While I walked through the door that separates the lobby from the rink, the first thing I noticed is that neither team is on the ice. The score was 3-3 and the referees looked a little frightened. Since the game had recently started, this was very odd. At that moment, the door to locker room 1 flew open so hard that one of the hinges broke. Out of the door flew the limp body of a 20-something-year-old man with baggy jeans and a long white and bloody shirt, followed closely by his flat-brimmed hat and his 2 equally humbled buddies. This is what went down. At around the beginning of the second period, both teams noticed a group of 3 thugs slip in past the back door and start looting the wallets and cell phones from the players' clothes. This was a common problem at the rink, and the players are advised not to bring in valuables. As common a problem as it was, both teams were on high alert from being robbed in this way just a week prior. The captains had the game stopped and called a timeout. This is when things got ugly. Imagine the look on these crooks' faces when an army of 18 heavily padded, enraged men with 5-foot-long weapons came storming into the small room to find them with a pile of cell phones, wallets, and watches. The first guy was knocked out by the time the cops arrived. The other 2 weren't knocked out and actually attempted to run. A quick crack to the shin with a hockey stick was all that was needed to keep them from leaving. The players all gathered around the thieves in an impenetrable circle until the cops came. I spoke to the player who admitted that he knocked the first guy out cold with a chop in the dome. He said that when his wallet was stolen the week before, it left with only the copy of his favorite picture of his daughter who died a year earlier. This guy was in his 30s, so the daughter couldn't have been very old. He had a feeling that he would go to jail, but I decided not to pass this info on to the cops. The cops asked these players if they wanted them to go to jail. One guy chimed in and said, "I think they've had enough," and the rest of the players disagreed and say, "No they haven't, frick them." Off they went. Don't steal from hockey players, especially 18 of them. Story 3. This is my story of how Visa paid me for a diamond ring. One day I went to check my credit card bill and I noticed that there were 2 really odd charges. One at some random jewelry store in Seattle and one at jcpenney.com. This was back in 2003 before they would call you instantly. I called them and they said that they would take care of it. The charges were removed immediately. I thought I was done with the whole thing. My wife's family lives out of the country and we go visit them every year for Christmas. Everyone just buys stuff and ships it to us in the months before, so we get random packages all the time. A day or two later, my wife, then girlfriend, calls me at school and says, did you order a 3-diamond engagement ring? Now she knows it's not for her because she hates diamonds. We quickly figure out that this must be the $2,000 charge on my credit card bill. It seems they had the item shipped overnight and had no idea that they sent it to my address, and maybe they were hoping to pick it up in the mail. It's almost time to fly out of the country, so we stash it on my desk and figure we'll deal with it later when we get back. 3 weeks later, when everything is settled down, I call JCPenney and explain the situation. I am very clear. I have the ring, did not pay a dime for it, and would be happy to get it back to them if they sent me a shipping box. They offer to send me a prepaid thing so I can return it. A couple of days later it arrives, but it is only a shipping label and I don't have the original box. I don't want to be responsible for the item getting damaged and shipping, so I called JCPenney and explained the whole thing again. They say I should just bring the label and the ring to a local JCPenney and they'll take care of it. So we hop in the car and go to the local store. Here is the flow of events. The service desk won't help us. Anything jewelry must be handled by that department. The jewelry department looks up that order and finds that it is a special order and only the special order department can do anything with it. There just so happens to be a special order counter downstairs. So we end up at the special order counter and I explain the whole story to the guy behind the counter. He gets his manager and I explain it. I am very clear that this is not my ring and I have not paid for it. The guy at the register, with his manager standing behind him, tells me that the only way he can ship the ring back is as a return and he has to put the full amount back on the original credit card. His books need to match in/out and so that was his only option. I ask if they're gonna be mad that they paid for the ring and he says if they come after anyone, it's gonna be me. Okay then, I say as I hand him my credit card and he puts $2,000 on it. I figure in a week or two, JCPenney will call and get their money back. The call does not come. Not in 3 weeks or 3 months. A year later, the credit card company gets tired of me having such a large positive balance and mails me a check for $2,000. Story 4. I had a break-in in my house and we left the back door with the key inside and we have a cat flap. Turns out they could reach the key and open the door. Pretty clever. Unfortunately, that was the only amount of intelligence that they would show. They stole a multi-pack of Coca-Cola and that was it. I'm dead serious. They only stole Coke from my fridge and one of them left their wallet on my kitchen table. Had all their ID and everything. It also happened to contain a 20-pound note which I promptly took before calling the police. The 2 guys were caught and I heard a few months ago they're serving 6 months in prison. I hope those Coca-Colas were worth it. Story 5. I've got one from this past weekend actually. I volunteer to clean up at a local park. It's called a park, but it has no facilities, no employees, etc. It's really more of a forest and it doesn't get much official attention. Anyway, almost every day I walk through, pick up the trash, and ensure that it's properly disposed of. It's a beautiful park and I like to keep it that way. So Sunday afternoon, I found that someone had dumped a large amount of construction debris in the park along one of the access roads. As I piled it up neatly, I found the receipt with the guy's name, address, and phone number, along with a description of his vehicle, including the make, model, mileage, and VIN. So I called the state park police and asked to speak with an officer. Showed him the dumped trash and showed him the receipt I found and made a formal complaint. He gave me the usual, "Oh, we'll let you know if we need anything else from you." The officer called me last night to thank me for finding the receipt. He said they went and paid the guy a visit, found that vehicle in the driveway, and answered the door. "Are you John Doe?" He said, "Yes, that's me." The officer said he insisted he knew nothing about illegal dumping, no surprise, and when it seemed like the interrogation was going nowhere, he pulled out the receipt and the guy said, "That's not my name." He already said it was him. The officer told me that's when he said, "Okay, sir, if you're not going to properly identify yourself, you're under arrest for obstructing a government official. A Class A misdemeanor, and we'll fingerprint you at the station and find out who you really are." Suddenly, the guy's story changed. He was the guy on the receipt, and that was his truck, and he dumped the trash in the park. The officer even said that the guy said, "I never thought I'd get caught," and he wouldn't have either if it wasn't for us meddling kids. Story 6. When I worked at the Guitar Center, a couple came into the store. The guy left and the girl stayed, checking out the guitars. A sales guy saw her holding 2 higher-end Gibson Les Pauls down by the low-end side of the wall by the BC Rich. He asked if he could help, and she asked a question about the guitars. He took one from her and went to check something on it. Once he was about 20 yards away, she bolted, just sprinted down the hallway to the warehouse, past the bathrooms, and busted out in the emergency exit door that lets out behind the store. 2 guys took chase and made it out in time to see a car squealing around the corner of the building. We really had nothing to go on. I'm pissed because having a $3,500 guitar stolen cuts into my bonus, and it just overall sucks to have your crew bummed about the theft, etc. Cut to 1 week later, I'm running my morning meeting and I'm told I have an important phone call. I take the call and my friend is telling me I have to check my email. I do, and there's a link from him to a Craigslist ad. The mother trucker posted a photo of himself holding the guitar. I know it's ours, I just know it. He describes it inaccurately and is asking for $1,000, gives a BS reason for it not having a case. We need the serial number. We need that frickin' number. Another manager calls him, pretending to be a collector. He casually asks for the serial number, saying he's only looking for guitars from certain years. He calls it a date code, but I don't think the guy is buying it. He tells him he'll call him back with the number, but he never does. We're antsy. We call the cops and we form a plan. Another of our guys calls and tells this dude that he just has to have this guitar. He'll come to meet him with the cash. The guy agrees. They meet at a gas station. The guy walks up with this gorgeous $3,500 Les Paul in a $35 gig bag. They talked for a bit and my dude asked to see the guitar. He looks it over and checks the serial. It's ours. Yeah, man, this is exactly what I was hoping for. Great guitar. And then he waves across the street to the cop car that was waiting around the corner. The dude is like a deer in headlights. Cops arrest him and even let us leave with the guitar. Back at the store, my friend's phone rings. It's the guy's number. He answers. Girl, were you meeting my boyfriend about a guitar? Friend, I sure did. Girl, oh, he's not back yet. Are you still with him? Friend, nope, I'm already home. Girl, oh, weird. Okay, well, did you get the guitar? Friend, I sure did. I'm holding it right now, thanks. Girl, oh, great, thanks, have a great day. 1 hour later, she called back, didn't bother to answer. She left a very nasty voicemail with a lot of swearing. Priceless. I heard he threw her under the bus in court and they were both in hot stuff over the whole thing. Story 7. I'm a fraud prosecutor, so I'm really getting a kick out of these replies. I prosecuted a guy for an eBay fraud. He had been selling car parts, spoilers, fenders, etc., and not delivering, which is fraudulent because he didn't have the parts and he'd spent the money. He entered a guilty plea where he would just do some jail time and then he would be on probation. His terms prohibited him from doing anything on eBay while on probation. I later found out that while he was in jail, he bragged to some others about his exploits on eBay. They encouraged him to step it up beyond bodywork and go for whole cars where there'd be even more money. So his first week on probation, he decides to answer a newspaper ad selling a car. He goes and takes a lot of pictures, but he does not buy the car. He then takes the pictures and lists the car he doesn't own on eBay. This auction eventually closes for substantially less than the price listed in the newspaper. Of course, that doesn't matter, right? He calls the newspaper guy and asks for a test drive, taking the car to the lot where the eBay buyer is waiting. The guy wants payment up front and will be gone before the eBay buyer and newspaper seller figure out that they've been had. Except that the car is a fairly uniquely modified Mercedes. It just happened to be owned by one of the top officials in the police department. Despite the fact that this all takes place in a large city, someone else in the department spotted the car while surfing on eBay. He called the official, who was surprised to learn that the car he'd listed in the newspaper was on sale on eBay. The official had detectives bid on and win the auction in a hastily arranged undercover sting. So when our hero took his test drive and arrived at the lot where the eBay buyer was waiting with a check, he walked straight into a set of handcuffs. With all of his emails as evidence and calls recorded, he pleaded guilty and went to prison. Who knows what he'll dream up there. Now I have a full-on justice bone. Story 8. A friend of mine had his backpack with his $1,400 engineering laptop in it stolen while at the campus food court. I had a weird gut feeling that it would turn up on Craigslist or somewhere similar. Every day for a week, I checked Craigslist. Exactly 1 week later, I found the laptop. This extremely stupid criminal took a picture of the laptop with my friend's login name. Yeah, very stupid criminal. So I contacted the seller immediately via email and he responded within 20 minutes. I said I'd like to buy the laptop from him. We agreed to meet at a nearby parking lot later that day. Next, we called the cops. They agreed to set up a sting on the thief. One of the officers pretended to be a buyer and approached the thief. The officer acted as if he was examining the laptop but was actually just looking for the serial number. Boom! It had a matching serial number and they arrested this dum-dum. A week ago, 4 months later, the guy was proven guilty and to my knowledge is spending a year in prison. Plus, my buddy finally got his laptop back. Story 9. Mine was stolen once, and the person ordered about $75 worth of pizza and had it delivered to their house. I visited the pizza place and said I needed a receipt for the pizza so my company would pay me back. They gave me a receipt showing the address they delivered it to, and turned it into the police in my town, and they were on the news 2 days later. Nice work, detective. Story 10. This kid that was in my class in high school years back ran an operation on eBay selling those underbody neon light kits. You know, the bullshit that makes you look all fast and furious. Anyway, he makes a small fortune selling the stuff. The only problem was that when the customer received their product, it was just a picture of a neon car kit. This kid had apparently worded his description to confuse people into thinking they were buying the real thing, but in reality, they were spending $200 on a piece of paper. A bunch of pissed off people from around the country called our local police and he ended up getting arrested. I can't remember the charge, but he had tens of thousands of dollars to pay back, plus fines. The entire town shamed him and made fun of him for crying when the police interviewed him and everything. He was all over the news for a while. Story 11. When I was 16 years old, some former friends broke into my basement. Among a couple of other things, they stole my radio, which was a giant boombox, and my bike. They also stole a couple of sports collectibles that belonged to my stepfather. My stepfather was not the type of person you wanted to piss off. Well, he was never a violent person. He had no problems with resorting to violence if need be. His sons, though, had hair-trigger tempers. It didn't take much for them to want to beat the shit out of someone. I'm pissed and my stepfather is about to lose his mind. He calls up his sons who head over to the house. As they're about to pull in, they hear music. The kids who broke into my house were in the schoolyard 3 houses down from where I live, listening to my radio and one is sitting on my bike. Beatings were ensued. Story 12. My dad is an ex-cop. He still knows and hangs out with most of the cops in town. After he retired, he bought a very large Ford pickup truck and had a custom paint job done to it. Everybody knew this truck. Some idiot steals it. Bad enough he stole a truck with a custom paint job, which is going to stick out like a sore thumb no matter where he goes. But the idiot decides to take it joyriding around town. Of course, once the cops get wind of this, they're all over it like flies on shit. Word spread quickly. If anyone sees JJ's truck, it was stolen. Nab the bastard. It's not like they had to look very hard. There were eagles pinned on the back of the window, each door, and the hood. It's not like the truck was going to blend in with the rest of traffic, especially considering the owner is well known. The guy might as well have had a neon sign saying, "Please arrest me," floating over his head. He was busted the minute he drove by a cop, which didn't take very long. Story 13. I used to live in a student rent, me, a friend, and a third guy whom neither of us knew. My friend and I went to a Newcastle for a weekend on a visit, and when we returned, both my Xbox 360 and his PlayStation 3 were missing. We quizzed Guy 3 about it, and he claimed that he'd gotten out one night and the door was open when he came back. He said he hadn't contacted us as his phone was broken, which turned out to be a total lie. Naturally, we contacted the police, and the officer who came around inspected the door and mentioned that there were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. A couple of days later, he left his door open while he went out. Neither of us totally believed his story, and we decided to poke our heads around the door to see if there was anything untoward. And what do we find? Yep, both consoles are plugged into his TV. We left the room and didn't mention it to him when he came back. Instead, my friend went outside and contacted the police to tell them that we'd found the perpetrator. About an hour later, he was being led out of the door in handcuffs. 2 hours later, his entire room was emptied out. We work damn fast when we want to, and in a pile of black sacks in the hallway. His father came by the next day to collect the stuff, verbally abused us, and we never heard from him again. To this day, we still laugh about the sheer audacity of stealing from someone you live with and keeping the stolen items roughly 20 feet away.